Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Dan Crawford from HearMeIn.com and the Green Pole Podcast. This episode, Dan and I are going to preview the upcoming quarterfinal FA Cup match for Fulham against Crystal Palace at Craven Cottage. Dan will be there, and I'll get his thoughts on this match and what it means to him, what it means to everyone. I know it means a great deal. We'll be talking about that probably in the next half hour. Maybe we'll go a little bit longer. And if you're watching live, please feel free to share your comments on the match. We definitely want to hear from you. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and then, of course, on X, on my X account. So plenty of places to watch us live. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's actually going to be exclusive on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. All right, enough of that, Dan. Let's get to it. You just said before we went live, you're a little nervous, Dan. Let's talk about why you were nervous, my friend, and what this means to you.
It's not what it means to me. I think you summed it up in your introduction, what it means to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's 50 years, obviously, this year since Fulham went all the way to Wembley as a second division side and in the 75 FA Cup final. And that's still talked about as a real moment for all Fulham fans, really. And I was too young to be a part of that. I missed it by a good decade. And I was saying to a couple of colleagues of ours, including Henry Winter earlier on, you know, the last time I saw Fulham in a FA Cup semi-final was all the way back in John Tagana's first season first season in the Premier League when we got to the semi-final. That would have been in 2001-2. And this feels massive because I think because of all the other factors, the draw, the number of teams, top sides that are out of it. We've got a home draw. It's against Crystal Palace, who seem to have our number at Craven Cottage. It's a big game. And I actually think Marco Silva's sides do well in big games. We don't freeze. But there's a lot riding on this. It would be a huge psychological achievement, just like it was to win at Old Trafford, as we spoke about, Russ, previously. It'd be a big thing to go back to Wembley. But Marco's been very clear. You'll have read and seen his press conference from earlier on. It's a big day for Marco. He doesn't care much about numbers, but he takes charge of his 500th professional match as a manager. Tomorrow. He's been very clear he doesn't want to get to the semi-final. He wants to win the thing. But the closer it gets, the more nervous I get, the more worried I become. And there's also that thing of it being an early kickoff, you know, 12, 15. Those games are usually dreadful to watch. There isn't much of an atmosphere. Well, we're going to bring the noise tomorrow. I know Palace will. So there are a few things in the Hammersmith End before the game. I'm not sure I can disclose them all, but the club have put something out asking people to get there early. It's a big game. It's a big opportunity for Fulham, and it's also live on terrestrial television, so everyone will be watching it. And you just want the team to do well. I can accept being beaten by the better side, but I can't accept being beaten in the manner that we were by Palace a month or so ago in the Premier League, you know, and I don't think we will play like that again. But I'm just nervous, Russ. It's sitting in the pit of my stomach. I can't kick a ball for toffee. I never could. I can use my voice tomorrow, but I expect I'll be hoarse by about 12 o'clock, so that won't be very, very, very good either.
Okay, Dan. And listen, I totally understand it. I was actually speaking to Tony earlier today. We were talking about this. He's as nervous as you. And I'm sure all Fulham supporters are extremely nervous. And I do like the fact that you talked about Marco's ambition about winning the cup. And we're going to talk about what he shared in his presser because I saw the comments that Jack Kelly, who is an excellent journalist, shared on X. And I want to talk a little bit about that coming up next. But you opened with your thoughts. I'm just going to share mine a little bit because I'm nervous too. And I was trying to compare it to my time following Fulham where this would lie, right? Because obviously I wasn't following them in 1975. I wish I was. I go back to the Europa League run and I'm thinking, is it similar to a match in the Europa League one? Is it similar to getting to Wembley? And I think this is its own thing, Dan. I think this is unique, and I understand the importance that we have on this. As Fulham supporters, this is a big deal. And I know the pressure is on, but I'm glad that you talked about this, Dan, that Marco's teams usually rise to the occasion. It's the best way to put it. And I expect them to rise to this occasion. They're going up and against an opponent that did a number on them at Craven Cottage. We're going to talk about that coming up next. The differences between the two matches as we preview it. But when I look at the tactics, it's funny because I saw a Crystal Palace supporter talk about that this is the difference of basically money spent on journeyman players with Fulham and tactics. And I think that is just utterly ridiculous. Regardless of what they think, that's just not accurate because you have two managers that know their tactics. And I think that's going to play a factor here. But I think ultimately it's who plays better on the day. And for me, if they can play to their ability, and this is what I kept going back with Tony on this, we'll talk about what can Marco do so we don't see what happened a little while ago at Craven Cottage. We could talk all about that. But ultimately, I truly believe, Dan, if the players play to their ability, they're going to win this match.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you'd hope so, but I do think Palace are a much better side than their league position suggests at the moment. And we can talk about the league table not lying. I guess it doesn't lie because they had an awful start to the season. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what opposition fans might say or do. You know, the Palace fans that I know are erudite, intelligent, and they won't be taking this lightly. But it is an opportunity to for us to put our best foot forward. You know, we were on terrestrial television against Manchester United. And it's a rare opportunity to showcase also the FA Cup, Russ. I mean, it's kind of important to my generation of football fans because it's special because I grew up watching Fulham in the lower league. So just getting to the third round of the FA Cup at that point was an achievement. I never envisaged as a young boy watching Fulham playing in the Premier League or anything like that. But there's something very special about the FA Cup, and it's the world's oldest club cup competition. It means something to everybody. The globalisation of the game and the predominance of the Premier League means that we have to prioritise being in the Premier League for all the reasons that you and I and our audience know well, right? But this is an opportunity. And for us, of course, people say we've never won a trophy. Well, we've won plenty of trophies. We've won the Intertoto Cup. Not many teams have done that. And we're a proud football club. We're proud of being London's oldest professional football club. And I hope the Crystal Palace fans recognise that. Don't try and their thing of, you know, oh, we had a football club or something, or, you know, we played in a park that went back to the 1700s or whatever nonsense they try and do every summer. You know, this is a London derby. It's the Roy Hodgson derby. In a way, they've tried to make it the Joachim Andersen derby recently. As you say, let's concentrate on what Fulham can do. Palace have got a very good side. We will have to be wary of them, particularly Mateta, who's been past fit to play. And after all of that kerfuffle, he's a very good player. We know where Palace is strong. You know, Birieze, we know all about him because he was on Fulham's books. There are a number of other players who can really make the difference for Palace. But I think it was Sahel, we've scrolled through it a little bit, but he said that the last game against Palace was deceptive. And we were awful against them. We'll not play like that again. I hope not. But there's also a corollary, which is we were very good at Selhurst Park before Christmas. Very good.
That's right.
Sort of 15 minutes. And it's a one-off game. Anything can happen. But I think what we have to do in order to win this game is to avoid being passive at home, to go at our opponents like we did against Spurs. I think that was the last time I was on with you, previewing that match, Ross. Go at these teams, use the advantage of playing at Craven Cottage in front of a allegedly sold out crowd. We'll see how many people actually turn up, but I do believe we've sold the tickets, and isn't that good given everything that we talked about? Reasonably priced tickets, hey presto, you sell it out, Ross. There's a message on another on another point. But yeah, look, we have to be on the front foot and hurt Crystal Palace before they hurt us, and that was the problem in the league match last month. We didn't do enough of that from the get-go.
Okay, excellent stuff. I'm also sharing some comments from Chris Goodwin, who happens to be a Liverpool supporter, but also is a Patriots fan. That's why, Dan, he always chimes in because he's a fan of what I do. So thank you, Chris. I'm just sharing some of the things that he's been sharing. So thank you again for
I hope he's not as
in.
depressed about the Patriots as you've been, Ross.
Let's not talk about the Patriots. I don't want to talk about the Patriots.
Yeah, what I'm saying, they need some good cheer. And, Liverpool's interest in the FA Cup was ended rather early. So I appreciate him rooting for the mighty Whites tomorrow, as he seems to be.
Yes, he is.
Seems to be doing. I don't mean it, Chris. I just like to wind Russ up.
Okay, enough, Dan. Let's move on. Okay, so let's move on. I do want to talk about this, and again, I hope to get Jack Kelly on Cottage Talk sometime because you and I have talked about it. You know Jack, and he is an excellent reporter, wonderful journalist, and he had some very good quotes from Marco Silva and comments from the presser. I want to talk a little bit about it because what I got out of it, obviously, the players that are going to be out, still Kenny Tete, but it sounds like, if I'm reading between the lines, Dan, he's getting close, which is very important as we got huge matches in the Premier League coming up. And then you have the players that are still out long-term, like Harry Wilson. And then, of course, Nelson is still out. Sorry, Dan, I put myself on mute a second. There's a Goldman.
That's all right. I was wondering what happened. It was remarkably silent, given that you were emoting there.
Yeah, but no.
I think to read between the lines,
yep.
The key thing is that we've got no new injury concerns coming out of that press conference. Just a couple of thoughts on. So Kenny Tete isn't far away. Neither is Harry Wilson, actually. They're both, as I understand it, doing ball work. But it's just a bit too soon for. Yes, it was a Goldman, Chris. Well spotted. They're just a bit too soon for tomorrow, and that's no bad thing, as you say. Having players of that quality to slot back in. Let's face it, if there are more cup games to come, and we hope there are, you'll still have to juggle a squad to play both a potential cup semi-final and some, as you pointed out, some very important league matches, starting with the trip to Arsenal on Tuesday, I think it is, the 1st of April, and then some really big games that include the return of the SW6 derby and Chris's own Liverpool in short order. So to have them back. But the interesting thing about this is obviously Sasa Lukic is match fit and ready to play, having played for Serbia. And it'll be really interesting to see what Marco does in midfield. But my takeaway from Silva's press conference is he did say he wants to go step by step and we shouldn't look too far ahead. But he also urged the team to grab the chance, I think was the phrase, to go on and make some history. And Marco's all about making history. You know, he's very committed and happy at Fulham, and that's been emphasised again this week in his TV interviews. And we should be grateful for that. But we also need to kick on to keep a manager of his calibre. So I think there's quite a lot riding on our progress in the FA Cup and where we finish in the league.
I totally agree, Dan, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because there's been talk even today that potentially, reportedly, there might be the club and Marco close to a new contract, which would be huge. But I want to go back to talking about the presser because I think Marco's very happy at Fulham. But we've seen the rumors, or I shouldn't even talk about rumors, just talk about. I've even saw Juventus. I now obviously the Tottenham situation. But if you're asking me, Marco Silva, as you said, is very happy at Fulham. He's coming off as being very happy. But I think the club needs to continue possibly in Europe to hold on to him. I'm feeling strong about that, or know that the club is heading in that direction. So what happens the rest of the season, including the FA Cup, Dan, I think is very important. Again, the presser, he shows of a manager that really wants to do something special. That's what I got out of it. And the one thing that I do want to just touch on, the importance of this match, Dan, because you've already talked about this. I was talking to Tony about this, and I want to get your thoughts on this. The match is coming up next. I know we shouldn't be looking at the Premier League because we're focusing on the Cup, but I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think if Fulham win tomorrow, I think that is going to give them so much momentum heading into two very difficult matches. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think I would, and I don't mean to be rude or anything like that, but I think you have to treat this as very different. Like, this is a one-off. Oh, look, hello, mate. Nice to see Mary Southgate tuning in. You can, if we lean back, you can see. If I take the camera back, well, I've got one of her shirts up here next
there you
to
go.
Ryan Sessegnon. So
thank you for chiming in.
There you
there,
go,
Mary.
Matt.
And I hope to get you on Cottage Talk.
Nice
sometime.
Nice to have a Fulham captain on the screen as well as in the comments. I forgot what we were talking about there. Yeah, so we were talking about the FA Cup and how we treat it. I get what you're trying to say, Russ, which is the momentum generated by a victory can carry us forward into these matches. But those league matches are important anyway. Marco will prepare for every game methodically. But I think this game is particularly special because of, for Silva himself, someone who grew up watching the FA Cup as a young man in Portugal, an exposure to English football. For a lot of, you can talk more powerfully about this than I can, Russ, because the FA Cup means something. It was an international date in the calendar. People know what the FA Cup means, even people who, might not be immersed in English football culture. For Marco Silva, that's why the FA Cup is important. This game in itself is a massive deal. I'd almost treat it as an abstraction to the league campaign because you know what? If it goes wrong, we've shown we can bounce back. We'll be disappointed for sure. We don't want that disappointment. But Marco and some of the comments that you put up, somebody was speaking about Marco's message about being ambitious is a key message. It's Kamal, isn't it? Kamal, who sometimes puts those lovely videos on your Cottage Talk Facebook
yes, he does.
page. I think he's got a future as a cameraman. Kamal's absolutely right on his last point there. Working in the media as I do occasionally, Russ, you're always told by a journalist, by an editor or somebody, get me an angle, get me something that will generate headlines. So actually the headline to take from the last week or so is that Fulham and Marco Silva are quite close, as I understand it, to agreeing a contract extension that will take him beyond 2026. That's huge. If any of the journalists, and I don't mean to demean Jack Kelly, who I've worked with and known for a long, long time, he's the only one who can be trusted after Peter Rutzler, much missed on the Fulham beat, to ask the genuine questions in the manner of one of our former colleagues on this show, Simon Peach. To ask the questions that will drive the Fulham agenda. And one of those questions is, well, how close are you, Marco? And, how much love do you have for this football club? Nobody needs an answer to that question because he's driven this football club back beyond where we thought possible 3 years ago when he took over the side. But just to finish on that point, I get what you're trying to say, but the players will always be up for games like Arsenal, for games like Liverpool, to try and do the double over the squatters down in Walham Green, right? You don't need to motivate your players for that. You won't need to motivate your players for this one, but it is about seizing those opportunities when they come and leaving it all out there on the pitch, running through the tape, as they say when you're coming down the finish line. This is one of those ones where you empty it all out. And we play situations a hell of a lot better than we did under the previous manager. The previous manager would have a totally different strategy. I see he's banned for mouthing off to an official, very naughty of him. I'm so grateful that we won't have a risk-averse approach to this game tomorrow. Marco will empower his players to go out and express themselves. And if they don't, they'll know about it. Okay. And that's the key to this. That's the key to really troubling a side like Crystal Palace who want to be on the counter. Like, go and take it to them, score the goals that we need to score, and then we can control the game. The problem comes when you are behind and chasing the game against a team as defensively solid and who knows their game plan as much as an Ollie Glasner Crystal Palace side.
Okay, excellent stuff. What I was really leading towards, Dan, talking about the matches upcoming, is that if they win, I just think it gives them extra momentum. I understand what you're saying. It's kind of separate because they're going to be up for it anyways. I just want them to be as confident as possible heading into those matches. But like you said, they can be completely separate. I only think if they win, it only helps the upcoming matches. That's where I'm going on that.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a controversial opinion, but I think it's more that this really matters, and we have a tendency as fans to build up the next game as the most important. But it'll be an emotional day for a lot of people. We don't get to a lot of FA Cup quarterfinals. Marco made the point in his press conference. You got to a League Cup semi-final last year, and there's a feeling. And we spoke after that game as well. Yep. There's a feeling that we could have and we probably should have won that tie and gone to Wembley. We gave Liverpool an almighty shock.
Yes, and I agree with this.
We're well equipped now. I don't even know what Marco's best team is tomorrow, so it'd be an interesting discussion to have later. But I think we're coming into form at the right time. And I think we can really challenge Crystal Palace. So from that moment, although I'm really nervous and I feel a little bit sick just thinking about the game at the moment, but we're in a better position than we were a month ago. There are players who can impact the game, and many of them have experience of scoring as substitutes and things like that.
Okay, and we're going to get into all that. That's the part that I really find fascinating when we talk about the starting 11. Who's going to come off the bench. I can't wait to talk about that. We're going to do that. I also want to mention, I'll be sharing some comments coming up when we get there, Dan, to talk about starting 11. I'm going to be sharing some comments from our friend here, Suhail. Oh, by the way, in case you don't know, Dan, his brother is Kamal. So they're brothers. So we got brothers listening to the show. So
it's a family, the Fulham family and everyone's family. I mean, it's all a family. Basically, you and I are cousins. If you hadn't thrown the tea in the sea,
okay.
We'd
do you have to go there, Dan?
Than that, wouldn't we?
Okay,
yeah,
you always got to bring that up.
Come on.
Oh, okay.
Keep
all right,
up,
Dan. All right, Dan. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about this angle to it, this part of it, because you've already touched a little bit about it, and I've heard so much talk. Obviously, a lot of the focus is going to be on the last match, on how Fulham played in that match, which was not well. And as you said, Crystal Palace are a tough team to beat. They're really entrenched in Glasner's system, and they play it well, and they're going to be difficult to break down. I get all that. But we did beat them at Selhurst Park, and I know that there were players missing from that. They're still playing the same system, and Fulham did a number on them. So let's talk about the two matches. I know that there's a lot of negative to take out of the second one, there's a Goldman, but how about the first one? Can we take anything out of that one What are your thoughts on both of these matches?
Well, the first game, I thought we could have won it by a long, long way. And yes, Palace were missing players, but they were also coming off a period where they played a lot of the top 8 or 7 in quick succession. They were devoid of confidence. They were, Glasner's first full season hadn't really gone as he'd expected. And when you talk to people within the game, they say you can't really make a judgment over the first 15 games.
Right.
Players will take 4 or 5 games. Mary, if she's still watching, will be able to tell you about the impact of pre-season, and it takes 2 or 3 games to get into the swing of things, especially if you've got new signings. But what was interesting to me about that game was some of the players who, as the season has gone on, are scapegoated or questioned. Someone like Emile Smith-Rowe, who scored at Crystal Palace, a really good goal.
Played very well.
Had a very good game. Andreas Pereira, as the game went on, looked really good. But the corollary of that is the first 20 minutes, it felt like Bassey and Anderson were getting in each other's way a little bit. And Palace had a couple of chances that we gifted them that, the man whose mug I'm drinking out of, I don't know how good don't know if you can see that's Super Bert Leno in goal there. He made a couple of very good saves early on, and he's going to be crucial. If you can, I don't want to go all Paul Bracewell or the previous manager on you, but if you can keep it at 0 for the opposition, then obviously you stand a much better chance of scoring goals. So, yeah, Maz is straight in there. It's almost like I primed her for it. There you are. It takes time to gel. I didn't, by the way. Miss Southgate's been working very hard as a teacher for most of this week. And, she's obviously looking forward to the game as much as anyone else. We don't sit far apart in H5 at the Hammersmith end. So I'm sure I'll get some notes from Miss Southgate later on my own performance during this podcast. It takes some time to gel as a side, but also we were excellent and Palace were poor, right? And what you've got to take from that game is if you play that expansive football, if you commit to it, if you pose problems for Crystal Palace high up the pitch, if you occupy their 3 centre halves, Gay and Lacroix have been excellent this season, but Lacroix had a little iffy moment in that game. He's grown in stature since then. And, of course, they sold Joachim Andersen to us. And I still don't know why they did that. I'm very grateful. But I still don't know why. And then flipping it around, you would ask me about the other game. And so I'll just answer it now very briefly. Because I know Stephanie will be desperate to have you back for a Friday afternoon or evening. Where
she might not be.
Well, indeed, yeah. We did not do that at home, and we allowed ourselves to get sucked into a much more attritional game. While I thought the first 20 minutes we were excellent, but we didn't respond well to Palace becoming more physical. We were passive. We made some dreadful errors for the goal for a couple of the goals, and it was a battle of the four needed to be in order to tackle a team who are very good away from home, very good away from home, and that's the difference for me. Is that Palace are going to play, as you've identified, that same system.
Yeah.
They know it. It's tried and tested. Everyone knows their role. Reminds me very much of the Roy Hodgson model for Fulham. You know, it might not be all action football, but it's certainly much more attractive than some of the 0-0 Hodgson performances on the road that established Fulham in the top tier of English football again. They will be able to hurt us, but we've got to take our opportunity to dictate terms. And that requires people like Andreas Pereira, people like Emile Smith-Rowe, Alex Iwobi, Adama Traore if he plays, those kind of game changers to get on the ball, have confidence on the ball, but also get in the box to support the striker, whether that be Raul Jimenez, and I think it has to be, given the form that Raul Jimenez has shown, and you would have watched a bit more of that than most.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that, but go ahead.
Well, I think we have to talk about how brilliant Raul Jimenez is, if only to watch you smile like that. But I would proud over Muniz, but there are a lot of people who say, well, how can you not give Muniz the start after he changed the game against Tottenham? And
we're going to talk about that.
Isn't it great to have that real 50-50 decision about
we're going to get into it, man.
Come on, let's get into it, man.
Well, before we do, I'm asking the question, how can Fulham win this match? And if you're watching live, we got a decent amount of people watching live with us. How do you think Fulham can win this match? I'm just going to share some comments, Dan, that we've already gotten, and you probably have seen them. And I think this is where we can start talking about this. This is from our friend Chris Goodwin. Fulham's big names need to turn up tomorrow, put Palace under pressure, and take the game to them. That's kind of where you're going, Dan. That's actually where I'm going as well. And I think I'll add to the discussion. I think it's important that Fulham score the first goal, but I think that's always kind of a given. But I think against a team like this, I think you need to play from ahead. This is from Black, White, and Fred. Raul struggled. I love it. Raul struggled against the Palace defense, lost time out, but off the back of a stellar international break, can you really start Muniz? And we're going to talk about that coming up. But what are your thoughts about just bringing up? I know it's simplistic to say score the first goal, Dan, but you've already been laying out how Fulham for 20 minutes in the last match were pretty good, but then they really dealt badly to the physicality of Palace. So I think they got to play from ahead. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'll just take those two comments in turn, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chris is right, but I don't know who we're talking about in terms of big names. I think one of the successes of the Silver squad is that there aren't any people who are really treated differently on account of how much they cost or where they played before. A lot of players have really embraced what Marco Silva's trying to build, and the camaraderie between the squad is very clear to see from how everybody reacted to. I'm sure you saw the video from inside the dressing room, or the locker room, as you guys call it, after Spurs, and how everybody reacted to Ryan Sessegnon, for instance, coming in after scoring the clinching goal against Tottenham. I don't know that we have big names. I guess what we're talking about are people like Smith Rowe. I'll defend Emile Smith Rowe to the ends of the earth, given he's a prodigiously talented player. My only worry with that is the way we've always talked about it. Can you get Pereira and Smith Rowe in the same team? You'd like to be able to do that, but you've got to be starting for me with Berger and Lukic.
Yep.
And, Pereira had a really good game against Tottenham. So you can't really drop him, right? I don't think. But I feel like this kind of game could be made for someone like Emile Smith Rowe. And then you've got Sessegnon. And then you've got a lot of players who can come off the bench and influence the game, right? And that's the point I wanted to make, is it's now a squad game. We can make 5 substitutes. We're in a position where we can now put 5 substitutes on the field, hopefully not all at once. Marco, thank you very much. Let's learn from the experience against Wolves. Let's be, he knows what he wants to do. And on the other point about, Black, White and Fred, I mean, I don't know. It's really tricky, isn't it? How are you going to explain to Muniz that he has to sit on the bench against Tottenham? How are you going, Raul always looks dreadfully disappointed to be taken off around the hour marker with 20 minutes to go. But I think the point about this is not so much about the individual striker in this system and which one it is. It's about how much support that centre forward gets. How many bodies are in the box with him? How many crosses has he got to attack? Right? What who else can get into a dangerous area to take one of those three centre halves into places they don't want to go? And if Maz is still watching as a centre half herself, she'll know that when you play as a back three, you know, part of the reason you play with three centre backs is you have a spare centre half who's not marking. Nowadays, you probably have two centre halves. Jimenez likes to drop off and come deep. It's really important that if it's Pereira, if it's Iwobi or Traore, whoever it is, that someone's busting a gut to get in there. Even if it's Lukic or Sander Berg, you know, you've got to get runners into places where Palace have a problem. Because if they're just defending the 18-yard box against one striker, it has to be a really good cross. It has to be such a good cross, right? If they're defending the 18-yard box against 5 or 6 white shirts, well, they might have a problem.
That's
and
right.
That is actually how Fulham can win this game.
Flood
the 18-yard box with white shirts. And if the crowd, but also how Fulham win this game is the fans play their part as well, Russ.
Oh, I agree, Dan. I think they're going to play a big part in this match.
Well, we're not known as the most passionate of fan bases. Unbelievably, when you see the two of us, you know, after a game, trying to compose ourselves and, you know, hoarse as anything from shouting at the television or shouting at the referee or shouting at somebody, certainly. You know, how anyone could question the passion that Fulham fans have. But this is one of those moments where the white wall or the 12th man, the Hammersmith End rule, or whatever it is, you know, wherever you are in that stadium tomorrow, first of all, turn up early, give these players the reception they deserve when they come onto the field, and be behind them throughout. Because you mentioned the Europa League run, you know, the crowd responded to Juventus, for instance, scoring very early.
That's
the last time we spoke about that. You know, the crowd responded. Crowds can do things, and Palace will have a fanatical and loud away support. But it's time for the Fulham fans to, you know, make some noise, even if it's just for Marco Silva, even if it's just for what we've done so far. You know, this is the start of a journey. This isn't the end point, right? And the players deserve the kind of atmosphere, the kind of fanatical support that represents what they give for us every day in training and every day in games. If we're asking them to run and chase every ball, then we've got to suck those shots from Iwobi or Jimenez or Traore or whoever it is into the net.
Dan, you said it perfectly, and I'm glad that you put it that way because the supporters can make a huge difference in this match, and they can really just get behind these players and push them ahead. And ultimately, it's the players doing the work, but the fans can really help them in that. And I think they're going to play a factor tomorrow. So I want to mention that. I'm glad that you brought it up that way. I've got some wonderful comments that's going to lead us to talk about the starting 11, but it goes into how can Fulham win this match. Let's go back to my good friend Kamal. This is what he shares. And I want to talk about this. It says, pressing can win this match, nonstop pressing, and of course, direct play. Now, where he's going on this, Kamal is not a big fan of Fulham's ticky-tack play at times. Not a big fan. He likes more direct play. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Well, Kamal can go and watch some football somewhere else if he wants to see the ball in the air all the time. And I think you're being slightly disingenuous. I think Kamal, like everyone else, sometimes wonders why someone in the middle of the park turns around and plays it back to Leno rather than looking for a forward ball. I would much rather Fulham take their time, keep the ball, tire out the opposition and work the openings, because we're a better side when we do that rather than lumping it forward. What I would say is there's a way to do both, which is you utilise the strengths of Adama Traore and Alex Iwobi, for instance, in carrying the ball. But if you're booting the ball Laurie Sanchez style over your most effective players, like a Pereira, like a Smith Rowe, then you can't complain that those flair players and those players who need to take those extra touches, Willian, for instance, would be totally marginalised by a game plan that has the ball in the air. So there's a time to pose a question with a quicker style of play and maybe a forward ball. Absolutely, we've seen that work. We've seen that work most obviously in the last match when Bernd Leno played it forward and Ben Davies was thinking about what he was going to be doing in Skopje rather than watching Ryan Sessegnon. Look, there's a time and a place for everything. The first point though on the pressing, he's right, but non-stop Gengen pressing is horribly punishing on the legs, right? And as a coach of not very great success in the past of many teams, you quickly realise that if you ask your players to press, that you'll need to go to the bench quite quickly, right? Okay. That both of these teams will press in some degree, but if you're asking Andreas Pereira, for instance, to lead the press, you'll lose that effectiveness and some of those flicks and tricks. So everyone will have their distinct role, but I actually want us to play in the way that Marco Silva likes us to play, because I think we'll concede goals by trying to play it out from the back, for sure. But the fact that you have Calvin Bassey and Joachim Andersen adept at playing the ball out from the back, the fact that you have two really good ball players in Lukic and Berger means that it gives the freedom for an Anthony Robinson, who we haven't talked about yet, and I hope Jedi is going to be fully fit. I think they had this fixture in mind when they pulled him out of the of America's commitments. I hate to be cynical about it, but I do think they'd have had this game in mind. If you can get Robinson going forward, if you can get Iwobi and Traore carrying the ball, you need to have a style of play that encompasses all of those talents. But you also need to have that variety. So I'm not averse to a ball over the top to see whether Traore can get the gallop on somebody, right? Yeah. Or a ball over the top that surprises them. Jimenez isn't slow. He's not fast. But, if you do start with Muniz, you will try those balls down the channels and things like that. So there's a place for both of them. Okay. But I'd much rather we play in this way than be passive standoff and boot it forward in the direction of, I don't know, Ivan Caballero up front. Thank goodness we won't be watching that tomorrow.
No, we will not, Dan. One more comment before we move on and we talk about the starting 11, because I've got a lot of comments that will help us in that conversation. But I want to talk about this because this actually surprised me, and maybe you got some thoughts on why we saw what we saw at Craven Cottage, because I feel that Bergen and Lukic can dominate central midfield in most matches against most teams, even some of the big teams, that big six that people talk about, but for some reason, Will Hughes did a very nice job against them. And this is a comment from Steve Reynolds. He's talked to me about central midfield and canceling out Will Hughes. What are your thoughts about the situation there, and how can Bergen and Lukic play a major role in combating what Crystal Palace are going to do here?
Well, I think, first of all, if Will Hughes has got an unfair reputation as a bit of a hatchet man, he certainly can mix it, but he's a very skilled footballer in his own right. And I think what happened in the league game was he was allowed to occupy spaces and be combative, and Palace were more physical as the game went on. Where I think we have to be cute is you can drop an Andreas Pereira into a 3. He might start to play a little bit further ahead of Berger or Lukic. Let's remember, neither Berger or Lukic are conventional holding or stopper midfielders, dominant defensive midfielders in the mould of a João Palhinha, for instance, or even a Harrison Reed, right? They are much more progressive midfielders who played in attacking roles. Lukic was a number 10 at Torino. Berger played further forward for Sheffield United and for Burnley, as we remember. He certainly has some experience of scoring goals at Craven Cottage. But what you'd need to do is nullify the effectiveness of that Palace system, and that requires you to be cute. And occasionally they'll ask Andreas Pereira, if it is Andreas Pereira, to drop in a little bit deeper. And you could play a conventional 4-3-3. But it's just the fluidity of that. That's what was missing. Marco's system works best when people interchange positions. And you can even have Alex Iwobi come off the flank and come into more central areas.
That's a good point, Dan. That's a very good point, because it's about fluidity, right? It's about, as you said, being a little cute, playing within the system, mixing it up. So that might be the way to combat that. I want to share this comment before we go to the starting 11, because this is from Kamal's brother, Suhail. He has been listening. Mix it up, direct and tippy-tappy. That's what won the game versus Spurs in the end. We didn't go direct until the last 20 minutes, and guess what? We scored twice. So that's a good point. You got to do a little bit of both.
If you look at the first goal, Russ, the first goal had some really, Muniz won a couple of headers there, did really well. But actually, what made that goal was some tricky footwork from Andreas Pereira in the penalty area. Yes, there's some dreadful Tottenham defending, but it was actually some South American Samba-style footwork from both of them, Pereira to Muniz, in the penalty area, some delicate skill that made the difference there. You kind of, look, you want to try and trouble the opponent. So I would say it's much easier to utilise the space in the lot. No, and Kamal's come back. I was taking liberties with what he said, so he doesn't want to say it. I don't watch Sam Allardyce's style of football. I was using what they call poetic license. Laurie was a bit, indeed. Yeah. Well, the big thing about Laurie Sanchez for me was he brought Stephen Davis, a terrific footballer. But Stephen Davis never got the chance to showcase his footballing ability because he was craning his neck to see where the ball was up in the air. The same with Danny Murphy when he came in at Fulham, and some of these other ball players. I know what Kamal and Sahar was saying. They want to see a bit of both and a bit of variety. That if Plan A doesn't work, we've got B, C, and D. Because as a previous guest of yours, Mickey Adams, was fond of writing in his program notes, if you fail to prepare, you're prepared to fail. And so we've got to have some different options. But I'd like us to start with the game plan and with the style that's got us to this point, because I think it's the way we're most likely to trouble Palace.
Okay, excellent stuff, Dan. All right, let's move on and let's talk about the starting 11. Before we do that, because I want to mention another comment from our good friend here, Mary Southgate. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for commenting. We got some great comments, but this one I think is going to set us up for talking about the starting 11, because she's kind of on the same wavelength that I've been thinking about, that I've been contemplating when we go through what I think Fulham should do, and I'm curious what you think, Dan. This is what she says. Our subs will be a big part of the game, for they have all season, but with potential of extra time and pens too, lots to consider. And I'm considering that, Dan, when we talk about the starting 11, especially the striker up front, because I think that's part of the story of what do you do with the starting 11? Who do you start up there? But
let me just say, as Mary's had some experience of scoring winning penalties this season for Ashford, perhaps you should be leading the penalty shootout practice at Motspur Park. Mary's far too modest to mention that she sent the goalkeeper the wrong way to win a knockout cup tie a couple of months ago, and Ashford are still in that cup competition and potentially to go very deep. I think they're into the semi-finals now. So good luck to Mary and her new side. And I'd be remiss not to mention that ourselves at Hammy End sponsor Mary for this season. But she's too modest to mention that she knows how to take a winning penalty in a penalty shootout. Her point is well made, which is we talked about how the subs could influence things, and you've got to consider that. This is likely to be a tight game, decided on a mistake or potentially decided very late on. So you want to have good penalty takers on the pitch.
That's
and all I would say is I was wrong, Russ, because at Old Trafford, I watched people being asked if they wanted to take a penalty, and young Ryan did put his hand up, and I thought he was going to take number 5, but it was going to be Andreas who was going to take number 5. And I don't wish to decry Andreas's coolness or, his motivation to prove his former employers wrong. But I'm glad we didn't get there, because we might have had a West Ham situation. Andreas will have learned from that experience. I actually think our penalty taking has improved massively. That was the thing from Old Trafford. Not only did Super Burnt Leno make 2 very good saves, but also the penalties were extraordinarily good. Right,
fantastic.
But to your point, who do you start as striker? It has to be Jimenez for me.
Okay.
For many reasons. One, he's in great form, but also he's very reliable from the penalty spot. Touch wood, and I'm going to touch something. Where's the wood? Here we go.
Okay.
Right. He's very reliable from the penalty spot. He's also a cool customer. There's not much that Raul Jimenez hasn't seen and done in professional football, and he's won gold medals in the Olympic Games, major national titles. Sorry to rub it in, Russ. Quite recently.
Stop going there, Dan.
Mate, you just tee me up for it. Don't ask me the question if you don't want me to go there.
Okay.
But let me take you through my starting 11.
Give me your starting 11. I'm going to counter you, because I know I'm going to have a different one. Go ahead.
Well, do you want to go first then? Come on.
Yeah, fine. I'll go first. Here's my starting 11.
My voice. Go on, Russ.
Okay, here we go. I'm going Leno, Castagna, Robinson as the fullbacks. Hopefully, Jedi's good to go. I'm going Anderson, Bassi. This is where it gets interesting, okay? On the left, I am going with Iwobi. On the right, I'm going with Traore. In the middle, I'm going with Berga, Lukic, Pereira, and I'm going with Muniz up front. Now, before you have some commentary on that, I am thinking about the substitutes, because I am forecasting potentially Fulham going into extra time and penalties. That's kind of where I'm going with my decision, Stan. But I think that starting 11 gives you a great platform to build on. And then, as Mary was talking about, then you can bring on the substitutions. You can bring on Willian. You can bring on Jimenez for a longer period of time. If you start Willian, in case you have to go to penalties, I want him there. I want someone calm that's going to be there. So that's kind of where I'm going on my thinking. Ryan Sessegnon as well. These are dangerous players to have on the bench. Emile Smith-Rowe. I want to go with Pereira. I've been killing him all season, but he was great in the last match, and I want to go with it because I think he can offer a lot against this team.
Yeah, I see it. I see it slightly differently. You won't be surprised to learn.
Shocker.
The back four's the same, and the goalkeeper is the same, obviously. And I think it's important that we go with the back four, because we tried to match up Palace with their system at Craven Cottage. We went with the back three. It didn't really work, right? I would go put Mary on the bench for any penalty shootout. Yeah, great shout, Chris. I'd go with Berger and Lukic, same as you, but I'd play Emile Smith-Rowe in that number 10 role, and I'd go Willian and Iwobi, just because I think there are some lingering doubts about Traore's fitness. For me, anyway, I'd just like to hold him back for bringing him on, because I thought he and Muniz made a huge difference off the bench against Spurs, right? And you give Jimenez the opportunity. I mean, that's really interesting, because I would start with Jimenez, but Marco didn't see it that way at Old Trafford, and you ended up with Jimenez off the bench.
That's right. I mean,
if you're to counter your Willian argument, can Jimenez do 120 minutes and tuck away a penalty? I'm sure he can. But actually, you want your best players out there to start the game. And the idea is that they save us all that anxiety. It's very un-Fulhamish, that. But I'd like to win the game in the first half. And then we can.
So you're looking at it getting ahead like we're talking about.
Well, look, yeah. And I'd be saying to you, I thought Iwobi had a terrific game at Brighton. absolutely terrific game. You've got the flexibility of moving Iwobi and Willian inside. You can tilt the system a little bit. If Andreas Pereira's coming off the bench, he can help to keep the ball. But look, all opinions are valid. That's just the way I'd go. And I always say this, we don't see them train. We don't know what tactical plan Marco has got. He'll have learnt from the last game. He'll have something new up his sleeve. He always does.
Yep.
And Fulham will have a game plan that's been sat down and worked through. I know that Mr. Lemonakis and the analysts at Fulham and Goncalo Santos and Stuart Gray and all of the coaching staff worked really hard on that to have the players well drilled. And so it almost doesn't matter what the starting 11 is now, because we've got sort of 17 or 18 players for the first time in a while who, as you said, each of them can make an impact. And it is a game where you might have to turn to a Tom Cairney, for instance, or a Josh King, or players who can break the game open. So whichever one of Smith Rowe or Pereira starts, the other one knows that they're going to have a role later on. Similarly with the strikers, whichever one of Willian and Traore gets the nod, you know that it's a squad game and you can count on that strength. But I'm just looking at it thinking, how can we get in front and what's the best way to do that? But, we see it differently. That's the beauty of following Fulham. I'd just like a less anxious afternoon, but I've got a feeling we'll be on tender hooks for a while yet.
Okay, but I also look at it, Dan, and I can go back to the Wolves match when Fulham brought on the substitutes and it changed the match. So I'm thinking that it's going to be tight, like you said, and I want to change the match. I want Marco to have the ability to change it, and the substitutes can do that for him. So I'm loading us up with substitutes with the feeling that this might go long, but I understand the way you're looking at. Let's get ahead and play from ahead, and I understand where you're going. We're just looking at it just a little bit different. I just want to share this comment from our co-host, Tony Gold. He says, "Evening, gents. Hughes is sick, doubtful." Someone else in the comments mentioned that. Fulham win this game being defensively resilient and clinical in the final third. Rocket science can do one key. Pereira, Smith Rowe. Interesting. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Tony's obviously kept across it all. I think there are some fitness doubts and things, but whatever the personnel for Crystal Palace, we know it's going to be a tough game. I think the last element of Tony's comment is key, funnily enough. How you solve that Pereira Smith Rowe problem or getting them both in our best side. And I don't think you can, because I think for this game, you've got to go with Lukic and Berger. Our best performances have come with those two as the fulcrum of the midfield. Okay. And they give the license for a creative player to play. So here it is. Smith Rowe must start. I think Silva will go. Pereira Raul must start. Traore and Muniz.
He's thinking like you, Dan.
Yeah, well, we win this game in 90 minutes comfortably. Yep. I wish he hadn't said that, because that's a hostage to fortune. And but look, I'm starting to feel the optimism of the Fulham fan base. That's
there we go.
Doing this show with you. I am a perennial worrier. I am the pessimist.
And I'm the optimist.
You are the optimist, Ross. So you're going to tell me that we're going to win.
Tony's
already told me that we're going to win. So I'm feeling better already.
Okay, very good. All right. Let's finish this show up, my friend, and let's go to predictions. So, and we're going to get some comments. If you're watching live, feel free to share your prediction for the match. Dan, you feeling nervous? Give me your prediction and I'll share mine.
I said 2-1 to Fulham somewhere else this morning.
Yep.
So I've got to stick with it. And the longer the day has gone on, the more I've doubted myself on that one. But I think it'll be a tight game. I think Palace have the potential to score a lot of goals. We haven't talked about some of their weapons in as much detail as we perhaps should have done.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They've got some serious players. Okay, they've got the one thing about Traore was Palace played
They shut
Traore.
him down.
Played Traore beautifully last time.
Yeah, they did.
Right, and you'll be able to talk to me about Chris Richards and a number of other Palace players in great detail. So I don't think this is an easy game. They'll be up for it. They've had history of going deep in this competition. They will look at their away record and also their record at Craven Cottage, Russ, which is exceptional in recent times. But
records are meant to be broken, Dan. Records are meant to be broken, Dan.
Right. Marco Silva is a genius.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that we can keep talking about an FA Cup run well into Sunday and beyond.
That would make me very happy. We're the oldest
team in London, and we're going to Wembley. And also, in the week that the club announced their 1975 FA Cup final dinner for May, it had been really nice. We haven't had enough times where Fulham have been the centre of the nation's conversation. I do think that outside of the sort of embittered elements of our local rivals, that the neutrals look at Fulham and think that's a club with real history and real character, and they recognise just how special and how lucky we are, as Tommy Trindle used to say, to support Fulham Football Club. And let's roar them on to victory tomorrow, because that's what it's going to take. Whether it's you, Russ, in Walpole, whether it's our international fans all over the world, many of them making the journey. Thank goodness the substation didn't blow up this weekend to derail people's plans. But I know of supporters from all over the world coming for this game, and they've spent an extraordinary amount of money to be there. I know that the players are right up for this. Many of them have said so. Raul Jimenez said so in the interview that he gave. Yep. So, top my optimism with your own prediction. Go on, mate.
Wow. Okay. Well, before I give you my prediction, I have several to share. Let's start with our friend Suhail here. 2-1 to Fulham. Then we have Chris Goodwin, who's a Liverpool supporter, going 3-1 Fulham in 90 minutes. Very good there, Chris. Paul is going 3-0 to Fulham. Wow, we got some people that are pretty optimistic, Dan. It's not like you, but more like me. That's nice to see. Kamal says Fulham 2-1. We will be a wall in defense. We are ready. I'm not scared today. Okay.
Might be a reference to the white wall there, Russ.
I was there for the white wall, man. I was there for that. Okay.
Seth with a brace off the bench. I like this from Black and White.
Yeah.
Fred. Black, White and Fred. I wouldn't like to sit through it, though. Being 1-0, that's rather like the playoff semi-final against Derby. I'd rather it be a bit more comfortable than that. But
okay, all right. And now let's go to Tony Gold, 3-1 to Fulham, Wembley. Dan, will buy you a pint or two if we win. How about that, Dan?
Well, Tony knows that I'm a lightweight. It only needs to be 1 pint. He also knows where I sit, so I'm looking forward to seeing him tomorrow. Win, lose, or draw.
That's great. Okay, we'll end with my prediction. Unless we got Mary, who's still watching, maybe she can share her prediction. I'd like to get Mary's prediction, but I did share this on That's So Craven. I actually had a comment of 3-1. So Tony and others that have this prediction, I'm going 3-1 to Fulham. Dan, that's my prediction. So that's how we're going to end this. I'm going 3-1 to Fulham.
Wow. Well, look, can I just say how much I've enjoyed doing this with you and the community that you've built? And Russ is too polite to say it, but it's scrolling along the bottom of the ticker there. Sign up to his Patreon page if you can.
Thank you, Dan.
Patreon.com/Cottage Talk. Sign up to Jack Kelly's Patreon page.
Yep.
As well, because these guys are putting in the hard yards, producing content. I did also want to give a shout out to That's So Craven,
Great
the After Dark. The After Dark feature that features Maz quite heavily, and all the other Fulham podcasts. I see friends of Fulham have made a return with some of our old contributors, including Mr. Greg. I have to get Mr. Greg back on this podcast. Has he forgotten where he started? It's very disappointing. And obviously our friends at Fulhamish who launched Fulham America. You're going to be on that at some point, Russ, I hope.
I'm going to be on Fulham America, and so is Max.
And with Max, when he bothers to turn up for one of these podcasts.
Yeah, whenever that is.
Whenever that is. But look, such a pleasure to do this with you, my friend. Oh. Hopefully we'll be speaking positively after the game. Hope everyone enjoys the game and enjoys their weekend, and come on, you Whites.
Okay, great way to end the show. I want to thank Dan Crawford. Listen, if it wasn't for Dan and Dan's being modest, there would be no Cottage Talk, because I was doing the show with Kyle Bond to begin, and Kyle moved to Australia very early on in the infancy of Cottage Talk, and Dan picked up the reins along with others from hamman.com. Without them, Cottage Talk would have ended. So thank you, Dan, and thank you for your friendship, everything that you've given me. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. He's Dan Crawford from hamman.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.